Hello and welcome to another video at the Film Stop. Thank you for checking in. We're still talking about our first cameras, and so if you've just bought your first camera and you've already gone through the first and second video, we're going to talk about how to set up your new camera. Now, before I go on, I want to tell everybody watching, you should go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done yet. We are still starting the channel, so we are hoping to invite as many filmmakers and as many film enthusiasts as possible. So go ahead and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share your comments on today's videos. Now, we're talking about our first cameras, and just bought your first camera. Now it's time to set it up. So you're going to need a fully charged battery and a mem card. So you go ahead and pop that in. Then go ahead and pop in your battery. Once you have that locked, I'm going to ask, have you read your manual yet? So if you haven't read your manual, I'd suggest you go ahead first and read your manual. I know as any filmmaker out there, you're always excited to go grab your camera and start shooting because you've watched all the videos and you just want to go and start shooting some sweet footage. But first of all, we first want to know what the manufacturers have instructed us. So we always look at the manual first. So go ahead, read your manual first, and then come back and watch this video again. If you've read your manual and you're ready to start up your camera, we're gonna turn our camera on. Then we're going to open our viewfinder. First few things that the camera is going to ask you is to set your time and date settings. So go ahead and do that. So once you've done that, we're going to look at the main menu. Now, first things first, we're going to look at our shooting modes. Our shooting modes are indicated at the dial here at the top. Now, we usually have 4 shooting modes. If you're a beginner filmmaker, you probably want to start with a programmed auto shooting mode. Here, the camera sets the perfect conditions for you to go ahead and take a photo or shoot a video. But if you're an experienced filmmaker or photographer like me, you're gonna go to your manual mode setting. Now, before we dive into the manual mode, we can speak a little bit about the other shooting modes. We have aperture priority. Now, aperture priority is usually a shooting mode where you are able to control your aperture, and the camera will set its own shutter settings. Now, this is usually useful if you're going to be taking, or if you want to control your depth of field. So this applies to things like portraits or single subject shots. The next shooting mode is the shutter priority. Shutter priority, if you want to control your shutter and you don't want to think about your aperture settings, the camera will set that for you. So this is usually used if you want to either freeze motion, if you're probably capturing something that's moving really fast, you want to freeze that motion, that's what you use. Or if you want to do motion blurs. So motion blurs can be anything from a waterfall, or if you want to capture light streaks in traffic, this is a good setting for those effects. Now, let's go back to our manual shooting mode. Now, if we take a look, if you go ahead and look at our menu, one of the first things I always look at when I'm setting up my camera for the first time, I look at my picture control. Now, for any other camera, this might be picture profile settings, and I want to go for the most neutral setting. This will allow me to actually be able to manipulate a photo in post so that I can change my color settings if I want a richer, or if I want to reduce the richness of some aspect of my photo. That's where I'd go. Another thing I always look at is my image quality settings. So that refers to the kind of photo quality that I'd want to be stored in my camera. So for a Nikon, we have the Nikon exposure format image file, Nikon exposure file format, and that is the NEF file. So we always look at our image quality in terms of how large, the larger the size of an output, and also how raw the picture will be. So for Nikon users, we usually have the option of picking a raw image plus JPEG. So that will give you two outputs, or two outputs when you finally sitting down to look at your photos. So the last thing I usually look at is my autofocus settings. Now, autofocus can be controlled from the camera settings. If you want to go and look at your autofocus settings, for Nikon, we have the custom setting menu where you can pick how you want your focus to be seen. Do you want it to be seen immediately when you press the shutter, or if you want the shutter, when the shutter is released, when the camera is in focus, or the shutter will release even if the camera is not in focus. So those are the kind of things you want to look at. For me, I'd want to look at an image that is focused before the shutter releases. And the second part of autofocus is on your lens. Now in your lens, you have there's an initial marked A and then an initial marked M. So for A, if you are really on the go and you're taking photos of a process, it could be an event, or it could be a once in a lifetime incident, probably if you taking something that's moving very, very fast. You want to put your camera on autofocus so that when they're taking the photos, you don't have to worry about shifting the focus ring of your camera. Otherwise, you might miss your shot. Now, if you're filming, there are certain settings we always look at. First thing we always look at is our frame rate. Now, depending on which part of the world you're in, people shoot in either NTSC or PAL, so you can go online and check which settings in your frame rate is most suitable for your camera, depending on which region of the world you are in. Now, after the frame rate, we're going to look at our log profiles. Now, for advanced cameras, for the Nikon camera, they just came out with end log picture profiles. So previously they weren't featured in cameras such as the D5300, but right now more and more manufacturers are creating picture profiles for filming that are the most suitable for editing in post. So if you want to shoot in the most neutral format when filming, there are certain profiles that manufacturers have. For example, if you look at Canon has C-logs, Nikon has N-logs, Panasonic has V-logs, and if you have a Sony camera, they have S-log picture profiles. So depending on which camera you have, you might want to look into those profiles for your picture. Now, after that, you're gonna want to go and check your autofocus settings as well. So if you have autofocus on when you're filming, it really depends with the kind of camera you have. I know Sony and Canon really have great autofocus settings. So if you go ahead and check your autofocus manually and see how quick it's able to set autofocus on whatever you're filming, that will depend on the camera you have. Now, after autofocus, we're gonna look at sound. Now, if you're filming something and you probably want to use your camera sound, you probably want to put the best optimum settings for your sound. So in terms of volume and in terms of balance, so that if you're going to use a camera sound as an output, you might want to go ahead and check on that. The last but not least setting you're going to look at when you're filming is the recording quality and the recording format. Now, recording quality goes back to the image that is going to be produced. Most people shoot, or a camera usually shoots 20 certain frames consecutively. So you'll find most people shoot 25 frames per every second. And if you're more into a cinematic feel, you might want to shoot at 24 frames per second. Now, if you want to go for a more slow-mo or B-roll kind of footage, people shoot up to 60 frames per second, or 100 frames per second, or 120 frames per second. So depending on what kind of project you're working on, you might want to look at those settings in those parameters. Recording format now goes back into the MP4 and MOV recording files. So if you were filming a project, the kind of file that you're going to use, it will either be an MP4 file or an MOV file. Now, depending on the kind of project you're going to use, most people can shoot an MOV file or can shoot an MP4 file. But if there are certain specific editors who might want an MOV file as opposed to an MP4 file. So depending on where your project is going to land in the editing studio, you might want to check on those settings. Now, if you've looked at all these settings, you are good to go, so you can go ahead and give your camera a test run.